The conference room went silent when the promotion list appeared on the screen. I scanned every line twice, my heart sinking with each pass. My name wasn't there. 18 months of late nights, weekend reports, and leading the Anderson merger, all invisible now. Then Richard Hale stood up, straightening his tie with that practiced confidence I'd once admired. "I couldn't have done it without my exceptional team," he announced, his eyes landing on me for just a second. That glance told me everything. He knew. The room erupted in applause while I sat frozen, my smile plastered on like cheap wallpaper. My hands gripped the armrests until my knuckles turned white. Around me, colleagues congratulated each other, voices blending into meaningless noise. Someone patted my shoulder, offering sympathy I didn't want. I nodded, pretending the disappointment wasn't crushing my chest. Richard shook hands across the table, basking in praise that should have been shared. But what burned most wasn't being overlooked. It was the certainty growing in my gut that this wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. This was theft. I kept smiling, but inside, something hardened. This moment would define everything that came after. I waited until the room emptied before approaching his office. My legs felt heavy, each step requiring conscious effort. Through the glass wall, I watched Richard pour himself whiskey from the crystal decanter he kept for celebrations. He saw me coming and waved me in, his expression shifting to concern so quickly it had to be rehearsed. "Corinne, I know you're disappointed," he started before I could speak. I closed the door quietly behind me. "You told me I was next in line. 3 weeks ago, you said my performance review was flawless." He sighed, leaning back in his leather chair, the picture of regret. "You're incredibly talented, truly. But leadership felt you needed more seasoning. Another year, maybe 2. The words landed like stones. Another year. Another 2. Always another. Who made that decision? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. The executive committee. It wasn't just me. But his eyes shifted left when he said it. That tiny tell I'd noticed in negotiations. He was lying. And suddenly I understood that everything he'd told me for 18 months had been carefully constructed fiction. That's when I saw it. On the corner of his desk, partially hidden under a manila folder, was my project proposal. The one I'd spent 3 months developing. The one analyzing market expansion into the Pacific Northwest. Except the cover page now read, Strategic Growth Initiative by Richard Hale. My breath caught. He followed my gaze and casually slid another folder over it, but the damage was done. "Was there anything else?" he asked, his tone dismissive now. I shook my head slowly, not trusting my voice. "Congratulations on the promotion," I managed, then walked out before my composure cracked completely. In the bathroom, I locked myself in a stall and pressed my palms against my eyes. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead while I fought back tears that were equal parts rage and humiliation. He hadn't just blocked my promotion. He'd stolen my work and used it to secure his own advancement. The man I'd trusted, who'd mentored me, who'd promised to advocate for my career, he'd used me as a stepping stone. Every word of encouragement had been manipulation. Every promise had been a lie designed to keep me producing work he could claim. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction from the past year. How many times had Richard asked me to share my ideas before meetings, claiming he wanted to understand my perspective? How many projects had I handed over, believing we were collaborating? The patterns emerged like photographs developing in a darkroom. He'd always presented my concepts as our team's approach, but somehow his name appeared first on every memo, every presentation, every success. Meanwhile, my contributions were footnoted or erased entirely. Around midnight, I opened my laptop and pulled up the congratulatory email he'd sent to the department. "Today marks a new chapter for our team. This promotion represents our shared vision and collective effort." Our shared vision. The phrase made me sick. There was nothing shared about it. He'd taken my vision, repackaged it, and claimed it as his own. I took a screenshot, saved it to a new folder I titled Evidence, and started going through my sent emails systematically. By dawn, I had a timeline that would have made a prosecutor proud. Over the next month, I kept my head down and documented everything. Every email where I'd outlined strategies that later appeared in Richard's presentations. Every project file with tracked changes showing my authorship. Every meeting invite where I'd done the work but he'd taken the credit. The evidence folder grew thicker each day. Richard kept me close during this time, probably worried I'd cause problems. He praised my work in meetings while simultaneously excluding me from key decisions. "Corinne's invaluable for execution," he'd say, "but strategy requires a different skill set." The message was clear. I was a worker bee, not a leader. My colleagues' attitudes shifted too. Some offered sympathetic looks but said nothing. Others seemed relieved they weren't the ones passed over. A few started routing their ideas through Richard instead of presenting them directly. They'd learned the lesson I was still digesting. Proximity to power mattered more than competence. But I kept collecting proof. Each screenshot was fuel. Each fake compliment from him became motivation. I wasn't going to explode. I was going to evolve. I was playing the long game now. The breaking point came during the Westfield client presentation. I'd spent 2 weeks preparing the pitch, market analysis, cost projections, implementation timelines. The night before, Richard asked to review my slides, just to ensure consistency. I should have known better. The next morning, sitting in the client's boardroom, I watched him present my work verbatim. Every graph, every recommendation, every carefully crafted argument, delivered in his voice as though they'd sprung from his mind. When the client asked about the data sources, he answered with authority, never once glancing my way. Afterward, the client praised his vision. Richard accepted graciously, then turned to me. "Corinne did excellent research support." Research support. I'd built the entire strategy, and I'd been reduced to a research assistant. On the drive back, he was jubilant. "We crushed that presentation. Good work today, Corinne." I stared out the window, jaw clenched, saying nothing. That evening, I opened my laptop and started updating my resume. I was done waiting for fairness from someone who'd never intended to give it. It was time to leave. 2 weeks later, I found a job posting for operations manager at a smaller firm across town. The pay was slightly less, the office smaller, but something in the description called to me, seeking independent thinkers who value integrity and innovation. I applied that night, crafting a cover letter that emphasized my actual accomplishments, not the diluted versions that had survived Richard's filtering. The interview process was refreshingly direct. The CEO, a woman named Patricia Winters, asked specific questions about my experience and listened carefully to my answers. She didn't interrupt or redirect credit. When I described leading the Anderson merger, she asked detailed follow-ups that proved she understood the complexity. "Why are you leaving your current position?" she finally asked. I'd practiced this answer. "I've learned everything I can there. I'm ready for an environment that values contribution over hierarchy." She smiled slightly. "That's diplomatic. But I appreciate honesty in my team." I met her eyes. "Then honestly, I'm tired of watching someone else take credit for my work." Her smile widened. "When can you start?" The relief I felt in that moment was indescribable. Someone finally saw me. Resigning felt like breaking chains I hadn't realized were weighing me down. I scheduled a meeting with Richard, keeping my expression neutral. When I told him, his face went through several emotions: surprise, anger, calculation, before settling on dismissive concern. "You're making a mistake, Corinne. Smaller companies can't offer the growth opportunities we have here." I almost laughed. "With respect, I haven't seen much growth opportunity here." His jaw tightened. "You're upset about the promotion. I understand, but running away won't help your career." Something in me snapped. "I'm not running away. I'm running toward something better." I stood, ending the meeting before he could respond. I'll finish out my 2 weeks and ensure a clean transition. As I reached the door, he called after me. You'll regret this. I looked back at him, really looked at him, and saw something I'd missed before. Fear. He was afraid I'd tell people the truth. Afraid his house of cards would collapse without my foundation supporting it. I already regret staying this long, I said quietly, and walked out. The freedom was immediate and intoxicating. My first day at Winters & Associates felt like breathing clean air after years in a smoke-filled room. The office was smaller, the technology slightly older, but people smiled genuinely when they said good morning. Patricia introduced me to the team with straightforward praise. Corinne comes to us with impressive experience in operations and client management. I expect you'll learn from each other. No power plays, no territorial marking, just work. I dove in immediately, analyzing their current processes and identifying inefficiencies. Within a week, I drafted a proposal to streamline their project management system. Patricia read it overnight and scheduled a meeting the next morning. This is excellent work, she said simply. Let's implement it. No committee reviews, no credit sharing, no watching someone else present my ideas. Just acknowledgement and action. For the first time in years, I felt seen. I stayed late that night voluntarily, not from obligation but from energy. This was what work could feel like when respect replaced politics. I called my sister that evening and told her I'd finally remembered why I'd loved this career in the first place. 3 months passed in productive blur. I rebuilt their reporting systems, trained junior staff, and developed client relationships. The smaller environment meant I saw results directly. My changes improved efficiency by 15% in the first quarter. Patricia mentioned it in our team meeting, crediting me by name. Corinne's process improvements have already generated measurable impact, she announced. This is the kind of initiative we value. Applause followed, genuine and warm. Sitting there, I realized how starved I'd been for simple recognition. Then my phone buzzed, an email from Thomas Chen, the client Richard had mishandled before I left. Heard you moved companies. We're expanding our operations division and want someone with your expertise. Interested in discussing a contract. I read it twice, checking policy boundaries carefully. Winters & Associates didn't have non-compete clauses for client work. I could accept. I replied professionally, setting up a preliminary meeting. When I told Patricia, she smiled. You earned that relationship. It's yours to build. Another first, a boss who celebrated my success instead of claiming it. The contrast to my previous life was stark and validating. The Thomas Chen contract changed everything. It was substantial. 6 months of organizational consulting for their expansion into the Midwest. The project pushed my skills and validated every capability Richard had dismissed. I worked closely with their executive team, presenting strategies that actually bore my name on the documents. When the client praised my work, no one intercepted that praise. It was mine, earned and acknowledged. 6 months later, when the contract concluded successfully, Patricia called me into her office. Corporate headquarters has been watching our division's growth, she said. They're impressed with the turnaround, particularly the Chen project results. I waited, unsure where this was leading. They're creating a regional operations lead position to oversee our expansion into 3 states. I recommended you. My heart jumped. The role is yours if you want it. You'll manage cross-divisional logistics and set operational standards for all regional offices. I accepted before she finished explaining the details. This was real responsibility, not stolen credit. A leadership role earned through visible, documented success. Everything I'd been denied before was now being offered freely because I'd proven my worth where people could see it clearly. My promotion to regional operations lead came with an unexpected detail. My territory included oversight of competitive analysis in markets where other firms operated, including Richard's company. I didn't realize it immediately. The territory maps and market reports took weeks to absorb. But during a strategy meeting reviewing competitor performance data, I saw it. His company, his division, operating in two markets that now fell under my analytical scope. I wouldn't manage him, but I'd be tracking his results, identifying market advantages, and positioning our company against his. The irony was delicious. 4 months earlier, he'd called to gloat about his company's regional expansion. "How's your little job going?" he'd asked, voice dripping with condescension. I'd congratulated him politely, biting back a dozen responses. Now, unknowingly, he'd stepped into my professional lane. Our companies would compete directly in the markets I'd be optimizing. I smiled, reviewing the competitive landscape data. Sometimes fate had a sense of humor. I didn't believe in karma, but this felt close enough. The universe was creating opportunities one couldn't have planned. I threw myself into the new role with focused intensity. Late nights stopped feeling like punishment and became investment. I analyzed market trends, built efficiency models, and developed processes that cut operational costs by 20% without sacrificing quality. Every decision was documented, every improvement measured. I wasn't just doing good work, I was building an unassailable record. Within 6 months, our regional division became the benchmark. Corporate leadership cited our metrics in company-wide presentations. Other divisions studied our processes. Patricia joked that I'd made her look brilliant, but the recognition was spreading beyond our office. My name appeared in internal reports, strategy documents, and planning sessions. Meanwhile, information filtered back about Richard's division. Turnover was increasing. Client satisfaction scores were declining. His numbers, once impressive, had flattened and begun trending downward. I didn't celebrate his struggles, but I noted them carefully. The market was revealing what I'd always known. His success had been built on borrowed talent, and borrowed talent eventually leaves. Without me producing the ideas he'd claimed, his performance was showing its true foundation. Nothing substantial. The annual leadership summit brought regional managers together for strategic planning. Walking into the convention center, I spotted him across the lobby almost immediately. Richard stood with a cluster of executives, gesturing animatedly, but something about his posture seemed strained. When his eyes landed on me, his expression froze. I watched surprise, confusion, and calculation flash across his face before he recovered with a forced smile. He excused himself and walked over, hand extended. "Corinne, I heard you done well, but I didn't expect to see you here." I shook his hand firmly. Regional Operations Lead. Our division's performance qualified us for the summit. His smile tightened. "Impressive. Moving up quickly. Turns out when people see your work directly, they recognize its value," I replied evenly. The subtext wasn't subtle, but I kept my tone professional. We stood there for an awkward moment, the weight of history hanging between us. "Well, good to see you," he finally said, backing away. "You too, Richard." I watched him return to his group, shoulders slightly hunched. The power dynamic had shifted, and we both felt it. I wasn't his subordinate anymore. I was his competitor, and I was winning. 3 months after the summit, corporate announced a major restructuring. 2 regional territories would be consolidated under new leadership. Both Richard's division and mine fell under review. The memo emphasized performance-based selection. Whoever demonstrated stronger results would lead the combined territory. The other would be reassigned or released depending on available positions. Reading the announcement, I felt my pulse quicken. This was it. The moment I'd been building toward without fully realizing it. Every documented success, every measured improvement, every careful decision had created a foundation. Now I needed to present it clearly. The review process included a comprehensive presentation comparing divisional performance. Regional managers would present their results to the executive committee, who would make the final leadership decision. I had 3 weeks to prepare. I began compiling data immediately, pulling performance metrics from the past 2 years. Our division showed consistent growth, 14% year-over-year improvement, rising client satisfaction scores, decreasing operational costs, increasing employee retention. The numbers told a clear story of sustainable success built on solid systems and genuine team development. Richard's division told a different story. I didn't have to manipulate data or exaggerate problems. The facts spoke clearly enough. His numbers showed initial growth followed by stagnation, then decline. Client satisfaction had dropped 8 points over 18 months. Employee turnover had increased significantly. Cost management was inconsistent. Most tellingly, his forecasts repeatedly overpromised and underdelivered, suggesting either incompetence or deliberate inflation of projections. I wasn't vindictive in my analysis. I simply presented both territories side by side: growth rates, efficiency metrics, client retention, employee satisfaction. Every comparison highlighted the contrast between sustainable development and inflated promises. My presentation was clean, professional, and damning through simple honesty. The night before presenting, I rehearsed until the flow felt natural. No dramatics, no personal attacks, just clear data and measured conclusions. Patricia reviewed my slides and nodded approvingly. "Let the facts tell the story," she advised. "They're powerful enough on their own." She was right. The truth didn't need embellishment. It just needed to be presented clearly, without emotion, letting the numbers speak louder than any accusation could. The presentation room was packed with executives I'd only seen in company directories. I set up my laptop, hands steady despite my racing heart. When Richard walked in and saw me at the front, his face paled. He'd known we were both presenting, but perhaps he hadn't fully grasped what that meant. I began with an overview of regional objectives, then systematically walked through performance data. "Our division has maintained consistent growth at 14% year-over-year," I stated, showing the graph. The upward trajectory was unmistakable. Client satisfaction has increased by 12 points, while operational costs have decreased by 20%. I clicked to the next slide, Richard's division. The contrast was stark. Comparative analysis shows variable performance in the alternate territory. Initial growth of 9% has declined to -3% over the same period. The room went quiet. I continued methodically, presenting employee retention rates, cost management efficiency, and forecast accuracy. Every metric told the same story. One division was thriving through sustainable practices, the other was struggling under inconsistent leadership. I kept my voice neutral, letting the data carry the weight of judgment. Richard sat rigid in his chair, staring at the screen as his division's weaknesses displayed in clear graphs and charts. I didn't look at him while presenting. My focus stayed on the executive committee, my voice steady and professional. "These metrics suggest different management approaches," I concluded. "One prioritizes sustainable systems and team development. The other emphasizes short-term gains that haven't translated to long-term stability." I paused, letting the data settle. My recommendation is to build the consolidated territory using the sustainable model that's proven effective. Questions followed, detailed, probing, but respectful. I answered each one directly, referencing specific examples and backing every claim with documentation. The committee members nodded, taking notes, their expressions revealing that the presentation had landed exactly as intended. When I finished and returned to my seat, the room's energy had shifted. Patricia gave me a subtle nod. Richard stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. After the meeting, he cornered me in the hallway, voice low and angry. "You think you've won something here?" I met his eyes calmly. "No, Richard. I think the truth finally did." I walked away before he could respond, my heart pounding not with fear but with quiet, earned power. 1 week later, an email appeared in my inbox. Subject line: Regional Head Consideration. I opened it with trembling fingers. Following comprehensive review of divisional performance and leadership capabilities, we are pleased to invite you to final interviews for Regional Head of Operations. Your consistent results and strategic vision align with our organizational goals. I read it 3 times, letting the words sink in. My name was on the consideration list. Richard's wasn't. I sat back, staring at the screen, feeling a mix of vindication and disbelief. The same corporate structure that had once ignored me now recognized my capabilities. But I didn't celebrate yet. Corporate politics shifted quickly, and I'd learned not to trust anything until signatures dried on official documents. Instead, I doubled down. I built a detailed transition plan for the consolidated territory, improving on existing reporting structures and creating development programs for staff integration. I wanted my appointment to be unshakable, built on preparation so thorough that no one could question my readiness. Every document, every proposal, every plan was meticulously crafted to demonstrate not just competence but visionary leadership. The final interview came down to one question from the CEO himself. What will you do differently if you become regional head? I'd prepared for technical questions, strategic scenarios, operational challenges. But this was simpler and harder. It asked about my leadership philosophy. I took a breath and answered honestly. I'll make sure the people who build results get recognized for their work, not the people who just know how to take credit for it. The room went quiet. It was a risk, showing my hand so clearly. But the CEO smiled slightly. Specific experience in forming that answer? Yes, I said simply, not elaborating. I didn't need to. The executives around the table had reviewed the data. They understood the subtext. They'd seen the comparison between authentic leadership and theatrical management. The CEO nodded. That's the kind of clarity we need. 3 days later, the announcement came. We are pleased to announce CORINNE Vale as Regional Head of Operations, effective immediately. Her demonstrated leadership and strategic vision will guide our consolidated territory forward. My phone exploded with messages. Colleagues congratulated me. Industry contacts reached out. And buried among them was a 2-word message from Richard. Congratulations. Those words must have tasted like rust in his mouth. Corporate sent me the transition file that afternoon. Scanning through organizational charts and reporting structures, I saw it clearly. Richard's unit would now report directly to me. The full circle was complete. 5 years ago, I'd reported to him, watching him steal my work and block my advancement. Now I held authority over his professional future. The irony was almost too perfect. I scheduled a site visit to his office for the following week, giving myself time to review his division's performance thoroughly. The data was worse than the presentation had shown. 3 consecutive quarters of underperformance. Multiple client complaints. High turnover in key positions. Company policy regarding sustained underperformance was clear. Regional heads had authority to restructure divisions, including personnel changes, when results didn't meet minimum standards. I didn't need to bend rules or seek revenge. I just needed to apply existing policy fairly and consistently. Still, I took my time. I reviewed every document, every performance metric, every policy requirement. When I made my decision, it would be unassailable, based entirely on legitimate business reasons that no one could challenge or dismiss as personal vendetta. The morning I visited his office, Richard stood when I entered, moving too quickly, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. His desk was cluttered with reports, his usually perfect appearance slightly disheveled. "Corinne," he said, forcing a smile. "Welcome." I sat across from him, placing a folder on the desk between us. "Thank you. I've been reviewing division performance." His smile faltered. "We've had some challenges lately, but we're implementing new strategies." "Your division has underperformed for 3 consecutive quarters," I said quietly. "Client retention is down, costs are up, and employee satisfaction scores are concerning." He shifted uncomfortably. "Those metrics don't tell the whole story." "They tell enough of it," I replied. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of history pressing between us. Finally he spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "You're enjoying this?" I considered his words carefully. "No, Richard. I'm not enjoying this. But I'm not sorry about it either. I opened the folder, showing him the performance documentation. Company policy is clear about sustained underperformance. His face went pale as he scanned the documents, recognizing that this wasn't vindictive, it was inevitable. Is there any way around this? He asked, and for the first time, I heard genuine fear in his voice. I thought about all the times I'd asked him for fairness, for recognition, for the opportunities I'd earned. I remembered his dismissive responses, his stolen credit, his smug certainty that I'd never be a threat. You taught me once, I said slowly, that the company values results over excuses. His eyes widened, recognizing his own words thrown back at him. I pulled out the termination letter, signed and processed according to policy. Effective immediately, your position is being eliminated due to sustained performance issues. You'll receive standard severance and benefits as outlined here. I slid the document across the desk. He stared at it, not touching it, as though refusing to acknowledge it might make it disappear. After everything, he started. After everything, I interrupted gently, the results speak for themselves. This isn't personal, Richard. It's business. But we both knew that wasn't entirely true. It was justice, delayed but delivered. He didn't beg, but he lingered, perhaps expecting me to soften or reconsider. I didn't. I remained seated, professional and unmoved, watching him process the reversal of fortune. Finally he stood, picking up the termination letter with shaking hands. No hard feelings? I asked, extending my hand. The words were professional courtesy, but the irony hung heavy between us. He looked at my hand for a long moment before shaking it briefly. Congratulations on your success, Corinne, he said, voice hollow. You earned it, I replied simply. Those two words carried more weight than any speech could have. After he left, I sat alone in his former office, now mine to restructure as needed. Through the window, I could see the city skyline, the same view he'd enjoyed while building his career on my stolen work. That evening, I walked past the building where my name had once been erased from a promotion list. Now it appeared on the directory, Regional Head, Operations Division. I paused, reading it twice, letting the reality settle. I hadn't just avenged the past. I'd rewritten it entirely. The sweetest revenge wasn't firing Richard. It was proving I never needed him to succeed. Every late night documenting his theft, every moment of quiet patience, every careful step building my own reputation, they'd all led here. Not to his destruction, but to my vindication. I'd won by refusing to be erased, by letting my work speak louder than his lies, and by understanding that real power isn't taken. It's earned through consistency, integrity, and measurable results. Standing outside that building, I thought about the younger version of myself who'd sat in that conference room, watching her name disappear from a list she'd earned a place on. I wished I could tell her that the pain would transform into fuel, that the humiliation would sharpen her focus, and that 5 years of patient work would deliver justice more satisfying than any immediate confrontation could have. The corporate world rewards many things: charisma, connections, political savvy. But in the end, sustainable success comes from genuine competence. Richard had built his career on smoke and mirrors, on borrowed brilliance and stolen credit. When those props disappeared, his foundation crumbled. I'd built mine on solid ground, real skills, documented results, and authentic relationships. That foundation couldn't be shaken because it was mine, earned through work that bore my name and carried my fingerprints. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with another message. Corinne, proud of you. Drinks tomorrow to celebrate. I smiled and replied yes. Tomorrow I'd celebrate. Tonight, I'd simply rest in the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd proven every doubt wrong and silenced every voice that had dismissed me. The long game had paid off. I realized I needed not to gloat or seek revenge through cruelty. I simply did my job. I never destroy anyone. All I had done was to outgrow him. That's my real revenge.